Well, g'day there. Welcome back to the Rayside. I am here on a very auspicious day talking to one of the key creatives into the creation of one of the most famously loved and revered trilogies in the world, in the film world specifically. We are talking today to Gavin Bouquet, who was the lead production designer on all three of the prequels. Gavin, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
No, pleasure. Nice to be here. Hope I can remember
So
something.
exciting. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the way it is because we're meeting today because I would love to celebrate with you the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace, and we were chatting just a little bit off air about the amount of time that was long ago. But I want you to step us back in time a little bit into this era of film and into your journey of film, because before we get to the Phantom Menace, your relationship with Star Wars doesn't actually start with the Phantom Menace. It starts even earlier with you being a draftsman, correct me if I'm wrong, on Return of the Jedi. Do you want to briefly
Yeah,
mention your very
Revenge of
first
the
involvement?
Jedi, as it was called at the time when we
Right.
were working on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have a sweatshirt, official sweatshirt with Revenge of the Jedi on it, which I
Wow.
think my
That's
kids are looking at that as a future investment.
investment. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, my journey to Jedi was, I mean, I'd been working in late 70s, earlier in the film business, and my main mentor to start with was Stuart Craig, who obviously went on, did all the Harry Potter films, did a big, one of our main production designers in the UK, and he asked me to work on a science fiction film with him called Saturn III, which was an infamous science fiction film with Kirk Douglas and
Mhm.
Farrah Fawcett Majors, and that was Stuart's first design job. So he sort of brought me into the business. I think I was a space equipment deviser was my official title, bizarrely, because
Yeah, right.
the union didn't have any of those. That was the problem. It was the union thing. You couldn't get into the film business unless you're in the union, and you couldn't get into the union unless you're on a film. But they didn't have a space equipment deviser, so I was allowed to go. And Stuart wanted to bring somebody on to sort of concept a lot of the hand props and display consoles and things. Concept art
Mm.
didn't really exist in that world like it does today. I mean, they had illustrators, production illustrators, and obviously Ralph McQuarrie was around from on the Star Wars side, but it was all done within the art department. But Stuart was quite forward thinking, and he felt that you need to bring in people especially to do that sort of work. So I did
Mm.
that work on Saturn III. I was then offered to go on to Superman 2 with a similar sort of sci-fi bent,
Yeah, right.
but Stuart persuaded me. He was going on to Elephant Man, the David Lynch film, and
Mhm.
he said, "Look, you'd be better to move sideways into something that's kind of more period Victorian England. And
Mhm.
if you get stuck in the sci-fi world, and there's no sci-fi films, practicality is there wouldn't be any point. So
Yeah.
I went with Stuart for two films. The Elephant Man as a sort of junior in the art department, and probably a junior draftsman. And he also did Mel Brooks' History of the World Part 1. So that was the first little three films. And then Stuart was offered Gandhi, and he was going off to India, but I was too junior to go to India. So he then
Mm.
kindly put me in touch with Norman Reynolds, who was doing Jedi, and that's
Yeah.
what the connection was to jump onto Jedi. Although called a draftsman, it was still really doing the same things, that sort of prop
Yeah.
and concept design, really still drawing. Um,
Mm.
and in fact, Stuart and Norman really became my two mentors. I not continually, but jumping between the two of them as they had films coming up. So, four or
Mm.
five films with each of them. So that was sort of my, film education, if on set education.
Mm.
So Norman was my first experience of Star Wars at that time. And you can imagine at my age, it was like, whoa, wow, this is like, walking around in a daze most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I can imagine that the buzz on set, and especially at that kind of important part of the trilogy, especially at that time. Like that was the final movie
Yes,
for
yeah.
what everyone knew. Yeah,
Yeah, no, and I was,
absolutely.
I ended up being, yeah, as you do in the art department, you can, they have a standby art director, somebody from the art department who's on the shooting unit to look after. So I was alternating that with Fred Hole, who was a very serious art director, very nice. I don't mean serious in a serious way, but high-end art director who worked with Norman a lot, and he was really helpful to me, and we swapped. So I was also standing by on a lot of the Jedi shoots, which was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is pretty amazing. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, yeah, like you say, what a fantastic practical education that threw you into, and the steps leading up to what we're gonna be getting into the next Star Wars movie to come, which was Phantom Menace.
yeah,
How did your career kind of snake its way up that movie? Because young,
yeah. Well, I
young.
spent the rest of the 80s. I spent the rest of the 80s, going up the ladder in the art department with Stuart and Norman, with other people, and I got to the late 80s, and I was thinking I didn't really have an ambition to be a production designer, particularly at that point. It just seemed so far away. It was more a question
Mm,
of being a supervising art director, maybe.
mm,
But I was also doing commercials, TV commercials outside as my own. So I was sort of beginning to get the feeling of responsibility. And then just anybody who's watching this, what you find, anybody who's worked in the film business, and probably most businesses, so much of what you end up doing is through sliding doors moments and synchronicity and bumping into people, that not through any planning. Every point along the way there'll be something where you can go that way or you can go that way. So somebody offered me a job on a TV show that was going to Hong Kong, and it was like a Miami Vice, set in Hong Kong with international cast.
mm.
And I did a series of that. I went to do a second series, but it got cancelled. And then, but bizarrely, I was offered Steven Soderbergh's second film as a production designer, Kafka, which he did after Sex,
Mhm,
Lies, and Videotape. And the connection there was that Norman Reynolds, the Star Wars designer, was work.
it's
Yeah,
great. We need a
yeah,
whiteboard for this or something.
yeah.
I
No,
love
no.
this.
It's this sort of connection of whatever.
I love this. Yeah.
So he had designed Young Sherlock Holmes, which was a Spielberg picture, but Barry Levinson had directed it. So Barry Levinson and Mark Johnson by that time of late 80s, had a production company called Avalon, no, Baltimore Pictures, sorry,
Mhm.
and they were making the film Avalon in Baltimore,
Right.
and Norman Reynolds was designing that film, and they took on board Steven Soderbergh to produce Kafka. So for some reason, Steven wanted a designer who hadn't done very much before, whatever reason that is. So Norman and Barry and Mark, because of I'd known them from Young Sherlock Holmes
Mm.
as a budding whatever, they recommended me to Stephen. So
Wow.
I had the interview, got the job, and that was all great. So to cut a long story short, at that bit, I'd done one TV series as a
Yes.
designer, and I'd done one feature film. And Kafka, it wasn't a particularly successful film. It's a bit of a flawed movie, very interesting but flawed. But
Mm,
because it was Steven Soderbergh's second movie, everybody in the film business saw it. Every
mhm,
director and producer wanted to see Steven Soderbergh's second movie. So I then heard on the grapevine that Lucasfilm and George were trying to make a young Indiana Jones series. And
mm,
I thought to myself, well, I've done one film, and I've done a TV series, and I know George. I don't know I know George, but I've worked with George.
mm.
So I thought, well, I'll try and there's no email, no internet, nothing. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you find out where to go? So I made a call to Robert Watts, who was one of the producers of the early Star Wars, because I thought he
Mhm,
might be doing the young Indiana Jones series. He said he
mm,
wasn't, and they'd taken on a producer called Rick McCallum, and
mhm,
so I then had to find out where Rick McCallum was, to
mhm.
find out, and it turned out he lived in the road behind me. It's very
Oh, you're
interesting.
kidding. Wow. Wow. Okay.
So
Right.
I
So
think,
and so that brings you to indie. Yeah.
yeah. So before Christmas, I put a letter through his letterbox. It was like that, saying, I'm so and so. I might be good. Didn't hear anything because it was Christmas, and then about 3 weeks later, he got in touch. Then he got in touch with George, and it sort of went from there. But even at there was no intention at that stage that Star Wars was going to, be down in
Mm,
the future. Um,
mm.
so then, Young Indy then took over sort of 2 years of our lives. Two series of that. There was a third series, but we were doing something else with George, the Radioland Murders film, at that point. And I always think Young Indy deserves a book. The stories,
Mm.
the stories and anecdotes from the days
Yes.
before health and safety,
Oh,
traveling,
yeah,
traveling the
absolutely.
world, trying to shoot in every country around the world. So eventually,
Yeah.
to cut a long story short, again, by the second series, we were driving around the Czech Republic with Rick in the van, David Tattersall, the DP, I think Martin Smith, the editor, Callum McDougall, one of the producers, and Rick just looked across and said, "Oh, do you fancy doing the next Star Wars film?"
That wow.
So,
Wow. What a question. So in that moment, yeah, what's the emotion? What was the response? Was a
well, first of all, it's you're such an out of body experience in a location van driving around the Czech Republic. Trying to
great
think about
place
the
to
show
do it.
you were
Great
doing at that
place.
time. No, it's really exciting. You never think
Yeah.
or have an ambition to do those things. And as I said, said
Yeah.
to your audience earlier, those sort of sliding doors moments or the bits of synchronicity.
Yeah.
I think George, you have to ask George, but I think there was always an intention that if the Young Indiana Jones series went well, and we were doing
Mm.
things incredibly cheaply. I think every episode of Young Indy was meant to be the same price as an episode of MacGyver at the time, and MacGyver
Mm.
was a
Mhm.
contemporary, present day, normal show. So to have the ambition of doing a period piece traveling the world for the same money, so George, he's done very well for himself financially, but a lot of those people, they're very careful with their money.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
so the idea with Rick was to really get this budget down on Young Indy. They wanted to
Mm.
introduce digital effects, very early days of
Yeah.
that sort of replication and adding stuff digitally. And on commercials, the cost was I remember about 25,000 a shot every
A
time you put
shot.
it in.
Yeah.
And George and
Right.
Rick wanted to get it down to $3,000 a shot for Young Indy. So they
Mhm.
didn't use ILM. They went to a commercial effects house in San Francisco. So I'm saying that because I think all through the
Mm.
process of Young Indy, George was
Mm.
waiting for the digital world to be at a point where he could do Phantom Menace. So
Mhm.
it was we had 2 or 3 years of digital work really taking hold in the
Mhm.
drama world. It had always been in commercials, or always had been in commercials, the TV
Mm.
commercials for a long time. And we did do this little film called Radioland Murders in Wilmington, where there was quite a lot of digital work in that too. And each of the steps was George just trying to see how far he could push the digital world. And when it
Yeah.
came around, obviously, to Phantom Menace, by that time, um, using digital cameras, he was one of the first to sort of bring that on board with David Tattersall, the DP.
Mhm.
So it's all very exciting, but you're going into work every day, and it's a
Mm.
job, and it's only when you go home and people outside go, "Oh, you're doing Star Wars? That must be a bit nervous." And oh yeah, it is. It is. But actually,
Yeah, right.
when you're at work, you've got a lot of good people around you. You're all at the same. We were all pretty inexperienced, if that's the right word. None of us had done anything that big and that responsible before, but you were all doing it. So,
Mm.
well, George, you've already spoken to him. He's very, very nice and pleasant to work with.
Yeah. Yeah,
He's always
absolutely.
been
It's that collaborative.
encouraging of new people into the film business. That's been one of his big things over the years, to get
Mhm.
youth and people interested in film. So,
Mm.
and I think
Mm.
that, I don't think there were many people that had come from the original trilogy. I mean, I did. I don't think George knew who I was. When I probably did, but I remember when we were.
Yeah.
I remember when we were at the ranch. Obviously, there weren't many things in the prequels that related to the first trilogy because we were earlier. So design-wise, apart from C-3PO and a few gadgets, no ships or craft, but I do remember we had to pull out a few drawings from Jedi for something we were repeating in Phantom Menace at the ranch with George, and they were my drawings.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's quite surreal. It's a bit funny.
20 years ago, well, not 20, 15, I don't know, 15 years ago. So, so that was a little mind blast thinking, when I was drawing those, would I be showing them to George 13 years later?
In my current line of work, which is purely a Star Wars podcaster and creator, content creator, my other dream job was to be a prop designer. So that your line of work in design of film I've just genuinely had such a fascination with all of what you've spoken about today. And I actually went and visited Fox Studios about this time last year because I just emailed them and I said, "Hey, I wanna kind of explore if this is what I want to do."
Yes,
and they let me in there to let me just have a look around and experience Fox Studios. And there was a few people there that had worked on Star Wars back 20 years ago, and they were sharing some stories of it, and I thought, oh, it's brilliant. So yeah, just a random little.
I mean, the first thing I ever did on Jedi was with Fred Hole, and they had built and designed the speeder bike, but it didn't have any dressing on it. It didn't have any little greebly bits on it. It was just a bike. So it was my job to find all the pieces and like little controls and things. And if you look at the front of the speeder bike, the nose cone of a speeder bike is it's a curtain finial that we bought from Borehamwood High Street hardware store, which is just outside Elstree Studios. So you'd go down to the hardware store and just buy stuff. And if you look at it, it's like this swirly little, it's this little curtain finial. So you don't, and that, to be fair, I've seen the models of the full size hanging in museums. I'm looking at this. There's a curtain finial up there on the front of. But I have to pass that was all created by John Barry and Roger Christian as a set decorator and designer on the first trilogy. That all the junk, all the stuff they did, because they didn't have much money, really, they thought rather than the sleek, smooth everything, they would just buy a load of junk and dress things with it. And I'm being simplistic about it. And that carried on right through all the shows, in terms of the Greebly side, because it was much cheaper to buy that stuff and then design everything than stick it on there. So, and I think they always used to, ILM used to sort of raid model kits and take bits of model kits apart to stick on. I know when we started Phantom Menace, I think it's John in the model shop at ILM. What they were ended up doing for their new models, they were actually taking models of Star Wars ships and taking them apart and using bits of those.
Oh wow, that's just
because in the early days they didn't have their own models; they were just buying plane models and ship models, and well, by the time we got to Phantom Menace, they could buy all the Star Wars models, and
that's fantastic.
It's funny; it sort of just went full circle. So you're actually using bits, you're cannibalizing your own models on the new models.
Yes. It really is. It's very much literally world building of the actual world.
Well, the story. I don't know the full, but the stories of the lightsaber is a camera tripod.
The flash. It's the part of a flash or something.
Yes,
the camera.
And we still on Phantom Menace. We used an awful lot of lawnmower covers. That was our.
Right.
Like as vent units, because the covers you get on them were quite so for a while we were just using a load of lawnmower covers, but it suddenly became a little bit more difficult in the early 90s because of copyright issue. they had to be
Oh.
really, if people were seeing their things,
Oh,
such a
right. But
litigious
their
society.
product. Or
Yes, I
yeah.
think, I mean, Lucasfilm had a load of lawyers, obviously, and I think the rule was in set decorating that you had to change the piece 7 times for it to become not
Okay.
copyrightable, if that's the right word. But
Yes. We'll
you
we'll
probably
go with
don't
it.
know it down there. But Qui-Gon Jinn's, Liam Neeson's comlink was a Philips Lady Shave. But you
I've
probably don't
heard
have
of
the.
this tale. I've heard of this tale though,
It's
that
a
it's a
lady. It's
part of
got a
a
little
razor somehow.
Yes, part of it's got a little wavy line on it, which is a Philips lady, a lady's razor. And I remember,
Yeah.
and when he got Liam, why are you giving me a razor? He's going, what's he gifted? But, but they did
Oh, that's
change
so good.
7 things on it for it not to be still the razor.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
you
That's
could see it. Today, I don't think they'd get away with it,
yeah.
on one way.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you've noticed it. This is always a tricky one. I always think I shouldn't mention it, but I can't see what's going to be a problem. Is that in Watto's junkyard? When they're
Yes.
walking down Watto's junkyard,
Mhm.
George wanted us to put in various things like the top of Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet in just poking out. And
Yeah.
there's a top of a Dalek in there if you look hard enough. And
Is
then
there?
we
Oh,
also,
so it's actually in there.
yeah, I don't know whether you'll see the one you'll notice is we built the pod from 2001. The little pods that they go out in.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Well, we built a whole one of that and buried it, and you see the arms are out like that.
Oh, you're kidding. I haven't even noticed any of this.
You'll see
Oh,
it.
I'm gonna
George
see
is
your
happy
light
we did
now.
it. It was just like,
This is
I
fantastic.
don't know whether you could get away with it now.
Yeah, yeah. Good.
Have a look at it when they're walking out. When
Jesus, I've
when
got mine.
Qui-Gon Jinn's walking out with Watto, they're walking past all the junk,
Uh-huh.
and you'll definitely see the 2001 pod.
Oh, that's awesome. I
I
love
can't
that.
remember where the
That's
Dalek and Robbie the Robot was, but
I'm gonna look for them now. I'll find them. I will find them. Don't you worry. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I mean, and you mentioned one of my favorite words, Greeblies. Greeblies,
yeah, that came from the
critical
previous.
part.
Obviously Jedi had existed, but John Barry and Roger Christian were the two that
Mm.
created that. And again, you'll talk to them, but they're obviously not. John's not with us anymore, but you know,
Mm.
again, that was all by default. It was all by circumstance that they created that process of junk and greeblies. Because it
Mm.
was a way to go to create things very cheaply, and it created a whole
Yeah.
sort of look that led on to Aliens. Well, everything we know now.
Yeah.
It created a whole world of dressing and prop making. But interesting,
Mm.
you're doing. Well, you should go and be a prop maker. It's fine.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, now I want to after this conversation. Come on.
But a lot of the time,
Fantastic.
that theory of how we do things is a lot of the time is we make it up as we go along. That's sort of
Mm.
another rule of the film business. There's no,
Yeah.
okay, right, what do we got to do today?
Yeah. 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 I do. I want to hack back to your idea of it's the sliding door moments where
Yes.
you just right situation. Yep. Let's go ahead with this. So
You can
there we
you
go.
can do certain things. I tell all the people who ring me up about you've got to let people know that you're out there if you want a job. You've got to ring people,
Mm.
email people, and if they don't know you exist, they can't give you a job. So
Yeah.
and you only need one person to give you a job. If you call 20 people, you get a bit down about it. Well, you still only need one of them. There's no point. It doesn't work if two people offer you a job. That doesn't help at all. I mean,
Mm.
you can
Mm.
only do one job at a
That's a good
time.
point.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I had to email today, and or no, called actually. They're called. You just say they're always a little bit nervous, but we've all done the same thing. It's sort of most people would be happy to speak to people who call them because they've all done the same thing. So I just say to them, no, just call. You might go grumpy person once, but just let people you exist, and then
Mm.
there's a bit of synchronicity. You need to call people when they're looking for people. And you
Mm.
can't plan that. That's the synchronicity
Yeah.
again. That's like you just happen to make a call. Somebody calls me and I'm happen to be starting something, but that's pure luck but
Mm.
so
Yeah, and then it will fit in like that.
yeah.
Production designer is such a fascinating role because it's really this connective tissue between a lot of departments and a lot of people and actualizing a lot of conceptual things. And I would, yeah, just I would love for you to delve into specifically the Phantom Menace had a lot of elements to it, a lot of different landscapes, different planets, different locations we were going to, physical and also just in the Star Wars world. How was that juggling these really new spaces that we were going to be exploring in the movie?
Yeah, I think if I remember, we had the outlines of the script pretty early, and that's
Mm,
always a huge bonus. You do work on some shows where everything comes in so late, you're not quite sure what you're doing. And we had
mm,
myself, and then Doug Chang was looking after the new concept group. So we were all
mhm,
trying to find our way and what's the best way of organizing this. I mean, they were
mm,
the two or three people, Eric Tiemans, I think, two or three others. They were all quite sedentary at the ranch. That's where they operated from in
mhm,
a sort of abstract world of illustration. Whereas George, if possible, George always wanted to find a location for
mm.
wherever we were going to be. There were obviously some planets like the water planet where you're not going to find that on location. You're not going to
Yes, well, you
you're not
can't
going to find a
find
volcanic
everything.
land where you can. But wherever possible, whether it was architecture, Naboo, um, or like in the other films, like the snowfields of Norway, he always felt
Mm,
there was a reality, a context. If something was real, the audience would take it on board more easily.
The original designers, like Doug, sort of have full freedom to do whatever they want. And then I will sort of modify it. Then I work with Gavin even further to modify it to what is actually practical to do.
It starts off as one idea, just gradually by discussion or sketches or showing ideas or reference photographs or location photographs. Just gradually, the process moves towards something that's much more defined.
So we can take this out,
Yes.
and then we can sort of dress
Is it for real?
this with
junk?
parts.
Yeah.
Whatnot. It should be great.
I'm not sure whether that's
mhm,
completely true because as a production designer, we feel our art department, we can create anything and make it look real. But if you
mhm,
can start
mhm,
with a real location, so we were picking out various locations that we needed to go, and obviously we were going back to Tunisia to do Mos Espa, Mos Eisley, and we did
mhm,
do a really interesting trip around Tunisia, going to the locations that had been shot previously with Norman Reynolds on the first trilogy. And we found all sorts of, I can't remember his name, but there was an archaeology student who was a huge Star Wars fan who sort of looked a bit like Indiana Jones. I mean, he was a young
Oh,
guy, but
yeah.
he was a young guy, but he came on the scout with Rick and myself and David, the unit, and we did a sort of 3 week around Tunisia from Jerba, the island, into the interior to the chot where they did the homestead, and we were looking at where they'd shot, and we would turn up and we would find things from the film. I mean, amazingly,
So,
there was one
so
place in Jerba where somebody had built their chicken pen out of some doors from Star Wars. They were just like
you're
fences.
kidding.
And
That's brilliant.
I know we
Oh,
went out
wow.
to the chot to see where they'd built the homestead, and the main crater of the thing, it was
Mhm,
still there. You could still see the rim of this. It's only 20 feet across, but you could still
yeah.
see those things. So that was our first step. But the picture you've got
That's
behind us
mm,
here, which you can,
yes.
no, not your
I
picture, the one that's on the
Yeah,
screen
no,
behind.
but yes, I chose it specifically. I was hoping you might point it out, actually.
Yeah, so that was one thing we were driving around, and these are grain stores that you find in Tunisia. So as we were driving through them, we were thinking, well, this looks like some sort of
Hmm,
homestead if you convert it with steps and things. So, and
hmm,
that's one of the things. You had long chats with Doug Chang and the concept guys that sometimes you need to be inspired by being on the location to find something. It's a bit like when
mm,
John Barry was designing A New Hope. Obviously, they did the same thing in Tunisia and found the sunken
mm,
homes. Decided to use that as the homestead base. So it's not just free thinking, looking at reference. It's actually being inspired by the traveling. So the picture that we're talking about there is a typical example of that. That would have never have come out of a particularly pure concept idea. It comes from the fact that we passed the location, and that was then the inspiration for turning it in. And if you can find a location, obviously, in one sense, it's a bit cheaper because it's already there. You have to build
Yes, you don't need to build it. Yeah, you don't have to.
But wherever possible,
Yeah.
we would always start by scouting to see, and that I could say that applies to most projects. I'd always sort of think, if we can find it on location, whatever it is, let's try and do that. Then it might become practical that you can't shoot the scenes on that location and you might have to go into the studio. But the idea would always be, wherever possible, if locations exist on the type of show you're doing, is to try and find them. And I think George always felt that the context of, even though you knew it was Earth, that it was on our planet, you tweak it around a few things. And if the story is working and the characters are working, the audience isn't going to question the fact that they sort of recognize the background. The only problem would be if you're not engaged in the story and the characters, then they might start saying, well, that looks like Naples, or that looks like Madrid, or, but if you're with the story, then it's incidental what's going behind. And I think George always felt that the locations offered a certain reality to what we were doing, that was real. Whether that's true or not to the audience, I don't know, but that was always the thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something so true about what you're speaking about here with the immersiveness of it and the believability of it all. And it's that kind
it's hard. It's hard for me as a production designer, because obviously I have to also say that we can do anything and make it look real.
The underwater one was the hardest because obviously underwater cities as such don't exist in any form. So George was very keen to use a sort of an Art Nouveau style on the sort of sculpted forms in there, just so there was a sort of a reference point. And in that environment, the audience does have something to sort of latch onto, subconsciously, maybe more than anything else.
I have to agree, there is something subliminal in the fact that something is real on basis. I mean, the thing we did last year, Silo, for Apple, that was a complete set build, with digital. Well, obviously we weren't going to find anything on location, but hopefully we still created a world that was believable without being on location. But the general rule, I think most productions and most art departments would say first, when they read a script, can we find this? Does it exist anywhere, or something we can adapt and build to on that?
And speaking specifically to Phantom, can you recall anything that there was a certain scene or room that the story had to be in that you found particularly challenging to kind of curate and work with, or was there any part of it that you thought, oh, this is a good challenge?
Well, I think the whole of Naboo and Theed was a sort of issue in one sense, because we knew that there was a sort of known architecture to that in an Art Nouveau sort of period sort of feel, but we knew George wanted to find that somewhere. We did build some things, obviously, but he wanted to find the basis. So I had a 6-week trip with a location manager driving through Portugal, Spain, southern France, and into Italy, looking at every monastery and cathedral and convent that we could find. And the location manager in Portugal and Spain didn't speak English, so it was me in a car with somebody you could get by.
So good.
You go,
that's good.
But we used to do like 3 a day, cathedrals. And what's interesting, it's difficult because sometimes you could open the door of a convent or a monastery and you knew immediately it wasn't right, but you couldn't just walk away. It was sort of rude.
So you would have to kind of,
yeah. So we're doing an hour, and of course, I mean, on another level, that's really interesting because the chances, as a person, that you get to see things, was brilliant. So there was that part of the brain was just enjoying looking at them. But we did travel all the way through that looking for Naboo, and Rick McCallum was pretty sure, I think, George, that they could get the Vatican. That was the idea. The You know,
Vatican.
the
Wow.
scale of the architecture is what they wanted, just the huge. But
Mhm.
for whatever reason, that didn't come about. Didn't have quite the
Yeah.
work. So we ended up in Naples in Caserta
Yeah.
in the palace there, and with the giant staircases, and that sort of became our basis of the giant architecture. And we didn't do too much to it dressing wise. I mean, Doug and the guys came up with some really nice sort of light fittings and sort of techie pieces that we could add to the architecture, physical architecture, without damaging it. You had to find ways of attaching stuff to stuff that's 600-700 years old.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it just gave it that sort of edge, really. But anybody who's been to Caserta knows that place, and I'm sure it's been in other films
Yeah.
since then. But as long as your story is holding the audience and everybody has
Mm.
empathy with what they're looking at, and we could, I mean, these days you probably wouldn't we could probably build a section of that and digitally add the rest. I think the digital world hadn't quite got to that point there. And George also liked the idea of being on location. He liked the idea of seeing where he was shooting. But today there might be a slightly different take on it. Can we build a section of staircase and we'll digitally add the rest? But, the digital world, as everybody knows, it's a magic wand. It can be a very expensive magic wand. It's not a cheap tool. You
Yeah.
have to use it like everything, cleverly. When you need it, use it. When you don't need it, most visual effects companies will always tell you, even today, build as much as you can, because they know what they have to do can really overpower a budget. So it's really it was interesting on Phantom Menace because the way it worked in those days, that the digital, well, if there were digital departments, there obviously was ILM. They weren't going to join us until about halfway through prep, so 6 months prep, 3 months in. John Knoll was the key one, but they were busy finishing something else. So we had lots of questions about, can we do this? Can we allow that? Can we go for that? Whereas these days you find on shows that sort of mix, the visual effects supervisor will be on the same time that I start, because it's such a connection between the two of us, especially like Silo, for instance, where you knew that a lot of the environment, certain instances, we had to understand right from the beginning what was possible for us to do and what was possible. I mean, it's never black and white, but what is possible. But in those days, we were desperately trying to get hold of John Knoll, but he was finishing some other show, and it was like,
right.
Very, very nice group of people. It was all very funny, but it was like we could have done with them a little bit earlier. But we were all feeling our way a little bit and how to do this. But by visual effects to one level it's not rocket science. The technology is clever, how it's done, but knowing what it can do and applying it, when you go back to the early days of, foreground miniatures and matte paintings and glass painting, right back to Gone with the Wind, it's still the same process of there's an environment and which bit's real and which bit isn't real.
Yeah.
It's not that, we pretend that it's complicated, but from my perspective, it's not. The technology is complicated, but not what you can do with it. What you need to know to be able to work with it. So, but I don't mind the myth being there that it's complicated.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the myth of it being complicated. That's so fascinating. So speaking more about and I love what you mentioned there, like the connection, and I think that's what I was trying to reference, of like the role of production design is connective tissue. You're just connecting to so many different departments, and especially all of what you've been speaking about. In this time, it was very much marrying that physical element, that reality of film, to the digital elements of film as well. And George being such a fan of that and such a pioneer of that digital realm was really fascinating. So I think we enjoyed. I don't think we realized quite, exactly how advanced that was,
because it was a
Mm.
day-to-day thing. We're going to try this, we're going to do that.
Mhm.
And in the end, for us, it's a camera and it's a lens. Whether it's a digital
Mm.
camera or whether it's a movie camera, probably doesn't really make
Mm.
too much difference for us. Obviously, I mean, we were aware with David Tattersall, the DP, that the HD version of what you were looking at, that what we do in the art department is sort of illusion. It's sort of
Mm.
like theatre. We have foreground, background, middle ground, and we can work to different levels of detail in those levels. But obviously,
Mm.
when everything is pin sharp and 4D and HD, you start to worry about, well, can we get away with that over there? Because
Right.
on
Yeah.
a film it would be a bit softer. But the advantage we had is that we did have playback monitors on the sets, which were HD. So you didn't have to wait until the next day to see the rushes, to see what it was going to look like. You could actually
Mhm.
look at the monitor on set and you'd have a chance to go, oh, we better do something about that. It's not working. Whereas prior to
Mm.
digital, as you probably know, the film went off and you came back the next day and you looked at it in the rushes. So it's almost too late then you didn't know what things were going to look like. So at least with the digital, you had real monitors on set that you could really,
Yeah.
the picture was there. You could see what it was.
Yeah.
Somebody would say, yeah, there's, so that was a huge, even though I think people like hair and makeup had more problems than we did, just because it was
Mm.
picking up every grain of makeup, on faces,
Mm.
usually quite a
Yeah.
bit soft with a gauze. So ours is generally a little bit further away. But we had to be careful of that illusion that we use, the theatrical illusion we could used to rely on, was a little less forgiving with digital.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and speaking of, the kind of the creations, the amount of, we talked about locations and sets and places and rooms. On the flip side of what was challenging, was there something that, was there a scene or sequence that occurred in Phantom Menace that you just thought, from a production standpoint, that was spot on, that went so well, and that worked so well? Was there any kind of standout scene?
Well, this not quite the answer to your question, but I think the first thing we shot, which was Palpatine's office, which was the Red Room with Padme, that was the first day. I think got photographs of the Rick bringing out the champagne and stuff, because
Wow, yeah.
because we'd all built up to this day. Could we do this? I mean, just us in the art department, but then
Yeah.
well, you walk on set and everybody says, looks like a set. Good. It's imputable. It's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
it was like that. So that probably, because we, however good we are, we think we can do things, or whatever doubt you have, or you're the imposter syndrome coming in, am I really tap you on the shoulder? We didn't really want you. We wanted somebody else, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because Tricia, the costume designer, obviously, you might not remember, but it was very dark red. That was always the intention of Palpatine's apartment. It's like deep crimson, and then Padme came in with her sidekick, her assistants or whatever, and we hadn't really. We were so busy. They all came in the same color. We hadn't really.
Yeah.
Tricia and I hadn't really talked in detail. We've got the main costumes, but we hadn't really looked at what her entourage was wearing. So there was a little bit of Tricia and I looking at each other when they wore, oh, is that? And when it was brought up that actually George really liked it, because he said they sort of disappeared.
Yeah.
They.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
When they didn't really, they didn't really disappear, but
just a blend. Yeah.
So again, those sort of creative, not mistakes, but those creative things that just happen without you planning.
They just happen.
But you need that. You can't theorize on everything down to the nth degree. You need the accidents to happen. I'm sure if you talk to a lot of people in the film business in any area of it, you'll find that some of the most brilliant moments in film have often been accidents.
Yeah,
whether it's
absolutely.
actors, whether it's this, whether it's whatever. So I think I would probably say that, although we were very happy when all the pod races were being built at Leavesden in London, and they all were being shipped out to Tunisia, and they all went on flatbed trucks around the M25 around London, heading towards Heathrow. And we
Yeah, right.
just saw a line of them leaving Leavesden and bizarrely they didn't cover them. So they were
Oh,
just on open flatbed trucks.
wow.
You
Wow.
know,
So you could just be
big trucks.
driving past
You know, I don't
Sebulba's
know
pod
what
racer
people
and all
thought.
those kinds
I
of
don't know
things.
what people thought that they were. But,
Wow.
I think it's funny. It's those little moments that you think. I mean, what I can't remember is always the order that we shot things. I remember the first day, I remember the last day, but the way schedules are, you're jumping around. So I think the first 2 or 3 are probably what you're talking about, because you just wanted to be sure you could do it. You know what I mean? That it was actually, we could do this.
Yeah. We're here, we're doing it, it's happening.
You weren't fired.
Yeah.
You weren't fired.
Yeah, that's it. You're still on set. You're still working on it. I love it.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. Yeah. Well, the Phantom Menace is such a fantastic. I mean, we could probably talk for another hour about just the film analysis of that.
Yeah.
Of that movie, and it's. I mean, from my personal opinion, it's my favorite Star Wars movie. So I'm particularly just so thrilled to hear about all that. It is such an incredible piece. But what is even more exciting is that, I mean, you had the continuing journey with Star Wars going forward with the rest of the prequels as well, with Attack of the Clones and Revenge, which, again, both we could spend hours just picking apart the elements of those films and what make them so great. But I would love for you to just talk a little bit about both of those films, how they stood out to you as working on them as production designer.
Well, obviously, we got asked back. So
Another plus.
What's up? Ahmed Best here, StarWars.com, Episode 2. Gavin Bocquet, here we are. Introduce yourself, even though I just did.
Gavin Bocquet,
Gavin Bocquet. Tell everybody what you do, Gavin.
production designer on Star Wars Episode 2.
He is the production designer. He is the man here at Star Wars.
One of many.
How is it working on Episode 2?
It's very interesting the first week. It's a bit like going back to school, and all the same people are there in the second year. It's
Really?
strange.
How is it? Are you having fun?
Having great fun. First week's always a bit mad, but we're just about on top of things.
What's the comparison between Episode 1 and Episode 2?
We were led to believe at one point that it was going to be a slightly smaller film.
Right.
From our point of view, it certainly isn't smaller. We've probably got about 25% more things to do, more sets, more environments, more locations, and the speed of the schedule is even faster than it was on Phantom. So the look of the film is just going to be mind-blowing, just because of the variety of things we're going to see.
And there was obviously a huge life change because all to do with money, again, dollar, pound, Aussie dollar. At that time, it was cheaper for Rick to bring the whole of the show to Sydney. So there was a whole family dynamic there for everybody. You know, it's a big 9 months, 10 months moving away. So that was very much part of the feeling. And I think we were also happy that, you know, despite some criticism or whatever, the film did really well. You know, from a fan's point of view, there's obviously going to be criticism of certain things, but it was enough that it justified doing another one and then doing another one. So we all tended to do it. We all did a film in between each. You know, it didn't go from one to the other. So, but it was quite comforting to know, you know, in this freelance mad business of being in work and out of work, that we did actually have something coming after the next one. You know, it doesn't normally happen. And normally you finish a show and you're trying to, you know, find the next, you know, whatever level you are, you don't get hundreds of scripts falling through the door. So I think we just felt a little bit more confident in the second two. Not that we were not confident with it, but we felt we could take the reins and take more risks, and we didn't have to always show every detail to George to get that tiny bit of approval and everything. There was a trust there, and getting the trust of a director from a production designer's point of view on any show is probably not the hardest bit, but that's the trickiest bit. They know your work, they know you can do the job in theory, but it's such a personality connection that the first 2 months, 3 months on a show, you're really still trying to prove to the director that they can trust you to give them what they want. Obviously, if you work with a director twice, that's brilliant, because you've got that from the beginning. So that was, didn't maybe realize it at the time, but that was obviously really helpful in Revenge and with Sith and Clones, was that George was completely at ease with what we were doing. We didn't have to, and we were away from the ranch a bit more that time. Obviously, Doug wasn't involved in the second two, but Eric Tiemans and the other guys, Ryan Church, they were involved there. But we were sort of doing a little bit more of that stuff, I think, in Sydney with our guys down there that we had on the production than the first one, where it was the concept group were at the ranch, basically, and a lot of the concept work was going through them. So there was a little bit of a handoff to that. But I don't think in looking at the two shows, I don't think you see a difference. I don't think the three shows, I don't think anybody would notice that anything had particularly changed. And, we're all dispensable. If I had died, somebody else would have come on. It still would have been good.
Yeah.
George maybe not dispensable, but the rest of us probably are. And these days, digitally actors are probably dispensable now as well to a certain level.
Yeah.
So I can't think of anything from a purely creative way that made us feel different. It was more the experience of being away from home in Australia, new environment, new people, slightly more autonomous working there than we were at Leavesden, and the connection with Leavesden to San Francisco. There was just, you don't want to get overconfident. That's always the dangerous thing. I mean, you still want people to judge what you're doing and criticize it in a good way, because, the ideas you come up with initially, me and the other guys around me, they're not always the right ideas first. You don't want to just sit there, well, this one. You need that feedback, getting a no to something. I mean, you probably know George's stamps, do you? They must have come up with your
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes. It would be yes, no, or fabuloso, okay, or nothing. He didn't have a hate this one. He just had those two. So, and that's fine. You just dismissed it was very interesting with George. You could never really explain a design verbally. He took it or not, because he says the audience doesn't have that explanation. They won't know why a design is good because it's this. They will just see it and know whether it works or not. So George always used to look at all the work up on a board, didn't need to know we've done this one because we've got that. It was maybe a couple of times, but it was mainly if it worked for him, then it was what. And we didn't, we never had to justify the sci-fi technology. That was never an issue with George. It's like R2, going up steps. We never quite saw how he got up steps.
Yeah, that's a great question.
But he did actually in Phantom Menace. You do, I think, in Watto's hut. I think you see him hover. George was not interested in the technology. It just had to work for the story. If something had to happen, I think it's like the old story of Star Trek, isn't it? That the transporter room was basically they couldn't afford to keep taking the actors in a shuttle down to a planet every show.
Yeah.
So the easiest thing was to invent a transporter system,
Yeah. So,
and I'm sure George said that the technology was not, well, it's a long time in the, long time, it's not future anyway, it's a long time in the past, but he wasn't interested in technology in the sense of reality. It wasn't like Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick doing 2001, where they were trying to foretell what was going to happen with technology. I mean, they obviously they got the timescales wrong, but but looking at that film, that's great. In the moon shuttle where you've got the TV screens in the back of the seats and everything.
Yeah,
that was so ahead of its time. Little things. But that was never George. I'm sure you know that. That was never George. It was if the technology. The technology just worked for the script, and you didn't have to justify it in a scientific way at all. Ever.
So that was a benefit So that was that made things easier in terms of
Him
like
and the
creative
storytelling, yes, for us, we never had
Yeah.
to. I mean, we didn't do anything magical. We didn't just have things like disappearing or whatever.
Yeah,
You had
true.
engines and you had things flying, but you never had to justify what the power was. I mean, we had hoses going to the pod races, I think, but we never really
That's
questioned
true. What
what
are
it
they
was
pumping? What's in
was
them?
going in
Is there
there.
something in them?
Yes, on that basis, they were just big jet engines. So that was
Yeah.
always a help. We never really saw it in a funny sort of way as a sci-fi film. Well, it was, of course, but it's much more about people and locations and storytelling than it is about the technology.
Yeah, it is funny that you kind of go quote sci-fi, but then almost not, because it's so much more than just
Yeah,
fitting into a genre, especially with those these movies. And I mean, yeah, getting to a technical level, yeah, but both Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith both have quite large, I would say, story elements in those movies. In Clones, you have the arena, the climax
yeah,
of that
yeah.
movie, the Geonosian arena. What was your kind of involvement and a situation of creating that
Well,
and that
we
kind
knew with digital technology by the time we got along to Clones that the idea pretty much was that the arena would be mostly digital. We would be doing the balconies for the upper echelon to be
of.
standing on and watching, and we'd have the ground. And
Yeah.
that was most of that. In the classic, as people know in the film business, outside the film business, that's a lot of actors running around on a sand floor surrounded by green. With
Yeah.
with no creatures or nothing. Which
Yeah.
obviously gets not criticized for that, but that's sort of actors like to. But that's how it had got to at Clones time, what late 90s. It had got to the point where we sort of knew. So we really helped
Cool.
from the concept design from the guys Ryan and from Eric. We knew we had to detail up the balcony levels and anything that our actors were interacting with. And it's the same way in Sith, on the lava planet, on the fight. You could imagine there were
Yes.
elements we had to
Yes.
do a floor, but it was an awful lot of digital work on that. Whether good or bad, that's for other people to judge. But it's sort of you just knew when you read that there's a point where not the interiors, not the Mustafar interiors that we had, like the conference rooms and things, they were all full builds and designs and
Right.
but as soon as you
Yeah.
got out onto the landscape, whatever it
Yes.
was, the volcanic world or the sand in the arena on Clones, you sort of knew when you read things what elements you were going to have to concentrate on. And, I mean, generally, if the environment is really big, the chances are it's going to be a digital world past a certain point. But if it's anything that's sort of got walls and floors and ceilings that are quite contained, then the chances are you're probably going to have to build most of that, because you don't want to be compositing backgrounds into every shot. That's the whole point of digital, people saying build as much as you can. But if in the arena, if the wall of the arena is 200 feet away, well, we're not going to build that. I mean, things like Gladiator, I think, and the new one, and they built a certain amount. They built a certain amount of the arena in that, but it was a huge chunk of the film. I mean, a huge chunk of the film, where as big as those elements were in Star Wars, they were still quite a small section of what the whole thing was.
Yes. Spot. Yeah.
It was like half the film where you might decide to build part of that. I mean, before digital, George might. Well, I'm just thinking back to the first three, whether they did build. They did a lot out in the desert in Utah, didn't they, with the barge? They had a half of the barge there. You think, would they have done that today? No, you don't know. Would they have gone that far? So I think there was generally in the first ones in the 80s, there were definitely bigger physical builds, but it got to the point where we knew pretty much with everybody that, well, these ones are going to be majority backgrounds in these scenes will be digital. But you see it as all as one. I mean, you're still creating the environment, and then you have to break it down in what you build and what you don't build. You don't just start from the bit you build and then they can make up the rest. It has to.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, some people might do that, some designers, but we always wanted, we want to create the environment that gets approved, and then you break it down into what you build and what you don't build.
Right. Okay. So it kind of goes from the digital to physical you're saying?
Yeah, so you don't like say the balcony, the balconies in the clones arena. We didn't design the balconies, and then here we are. Right,
Right. Say go from there. Yeah.
yeah, they essentially had
It was
to
the other way.
design the arena, and then we knew. Then we had something tangible to work off that had to work in the physical. Dimensionally had to fit into their world, but we knew we physically had to build that. So we were bouncing off each other all of that time. But the more we build, the digital people obviously love it in the sense that we're building real texture and real things, so they can bounce off that. They can get all their texture reference and color reference from what we're doing, so they do need that. So hopefully that makes it look more real. Yes. I mean, I'm not saying they can make everything look absolutely brilliant. I realize that, it's, if it's done well, you don't want to see the join. That's the classic really. But I think it was quite interesting on the model work we were doing by the time we got to Australia, because they were in San Francisco with George. So we used to do things like because of the day change, we would have usually 3 versions of a model of a set, like lined up, like small, medium, big. How much do you want to build of this, George? Not just his answer, and then we would video, obviously not Zoom, but they had a video link set up. So when he got up in the morning, was it that way around? I can't remember. When he got up in the morning. No.
Yeah.
No, when we got up in the morning.
Yes. We're Australia's, we're a day ahead.
Yeah. So
we're in front of America.
Yeah. So when we got up, then we were ready to talk to him in his afternoon. But we used to have the Price is Right stickers on the models, and we used to peel off the Price is Right sticker for how much that version would be costing. So just to give
good.
Just to give a bit of theatre to the process. And
that is brilliant.
And then he would then discuss with the models. He would just think about how much in this version of the model can I shoot in camera? How many shots in this model? We had a little pencil cam as well, which you had then, and you could go. We didn't have really digital models to look at. And he would generally choose the smaller or the medium size. Never, he always wanted to err on the size of, I will shoot contained within this amount of set, which saves the digital world a little bit. So we had a really good sort of relationship with getting those things going and bringing a bit of humor to the mad world,
Yeah.
And we did actually. We had I don't know whether I can't remember. The table football in the art department, and the guys in the model department. We had So we had. I don't know where it is now, but they made the figures that they were. I can't remember. I think they were C-3POs all on one side, and they were Darth Vaders on the other. I think that was that. And the model, that somebody has that somewhere, I'm sure, because we played it all the time at the end of the day. But those sort of things that keep you sort of, keeps a basis of humor and fun to what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's I think that comes out so evidently, and maybe more noticeable as time has gone on, of the creative energy and the energy from everyone on those films was so prevalent to make, and it comes out in the film of everyone was so passionate about every aspect of this film being great and the best that they can make it.
Another personal thing with George, when I know Rick and the production were trying to find George some beautiful harbour side house, when he was coming to Sydney with a boat garage, if that's what it's called, or
like a boat shed,
a boat shed they couldn't find. And in the end, he ended up in a semi-detached house just near Fox Studios, so he could walk to work.
Yeah,
that's just sort of shows where he is in that sense. He didn't want, and I think. I don't know whether this is a fable now, but I think the Aussie press, the paparazzi, couldn't find him. They could never find him.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah.
And the only place they found, the only place they got a picture of him was in the equivalent of Walmart buying Young Indy from a bargain bin. Right?
You're joking.
This is the anecdote. Now, I don't want you to put out anything else that's critical, this stuff, but because his kids were down there, Jet and the others, and he's really proud of he's really proud of young Indy, and it's sort of educational. That's what the intention of it, historical characters meeting up with young Indiana Jones. That he didn't have the format to show them at his Australian home. He didn't have the right format on the ones he bought down, so he had to go and buy them from Walmart. So the theory was that, but it might be an anecdote that's developed over the years, so don't quote me quite on that. But I remember it was.
I want to do my research on that.
There's a photograph in an Australian newspaper thing. That's the idea of him at a bargain bin buying.
I will find it.
That's actually rather. Brilliant. It's rather sweet. It's rather nice. It's not like it's not a critical thing. It's not like he's out drinking late at night. It's like
that's a good point.
He just wants to show his kids a show, which we all like to show our kids things we worked on, but getting them to watch them is a very different thing.
I love that. And even just speaking of George's character, which I mean, you've mentioned, through the process of the movie making and even now, but yeah, to try and sum up professionally with George, how it was to work with him, but also just on a person to person level, his interaction with everyone around him. How was that, and how did that impact you?
I think I've got to look back and, not going back to Jedi, that's a bit, I was just a munchkin in a sense then, on that basis, but it was just totally enjoyable. I mean, that's the easiest thing to say. He was very relaxed. If you worked hard, he had a really nice sense of humor. Nothing was ever too serious. Not in our world. Maybe something happened financially that it was serious, but he was always really good at making us all feel good. It was really encouraging. It wasn't critical. So if you look back, you got many years there, like however many years I was involved in that in between. That was a good run of 10 years probably, with young Indy, maybe more. And you've got to look back and say, wow, that's a pretty special event. And it's funny because I was talking about the Young Indy series on that podcast and then speaking to Rick, who's in Prague at the moment, Rick McCallum. You realize if you sit round a table with people that you work with that intensely, you could speak for days about funny events. You could just, just like, wow, did that happen? Did that really happen? Not in a bad way, but just how did we, a film sometimes is a bit like a battleship without a rudder. It's trying to get to port as best it can.
Yeah.
And eventually it always does get to port. That's the strange thing. Despite the mad world we work in with millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes, you do actually end up with a film, which is quite surprising, I think. One of the nicest bits for me, and it's really small things, is we're in the art department for the pod race. We gave each of the team members of the art department a pod to design. We said, let everybody have a go at the, whatever. So they were all working on their own pod engines. On that one, and mine is, and we did have I think we had a vote to see whose was the best. I can't remember. I think they probably voted mine because I was in charge. It's probably the real reason.
That's the way it goes, right?
Mine was the Dumpy Pod, which is the really little round one, and it's that silly thing where I've got it as a little model up here. You buy it still in its little cellophane box. I don't keep much from stuff. I don't keep all that stuff, but I do have this little thing. And, I can say to Alex, oh, there we are, that's mine. But the one thing we were talking about the pod race, and if you remember, there's a 4-engine pod racer that never gets going. And it just eventually it just explodes. And all the
and it spirals off.
Yeah. And that was my idea. That was my suggestion to George.
Quadranero's power coupling.
It is so great.
And it's only me that knows that, but but that shows what George was like. You'd sit around a table, you'd all have a sandwich, you'd be throwing ideas around, and then you'd suddenly find, oh, God, it ended up in I think that's the only one I can remember. It was still nice to have that clip, just like it's the humor, isn't it? It's the George always had the humor in whatever he did, whether whether he got criticized for it because of Jar Jar, but he was aiming at a different audience for that. I know the kids around here when Phantom came out, were of that age, like 7, 8, 9, and they loved Jar Jar. They thought, that's what George was doing it for, on that basis, and that's where he always was. And but I think a lot of people from the first generation had grown up and become older and not so kid-like, so they didn't relate to the prequels. They were a bit more serious by the time they got older, whereas the new generation were watching, for that. But the bottom line of it all is, it's George's world. I mean, he can make whatever he wants to make. It's sort of, if somebody wants to go off and make another film in their way, that's fine too, So and I think George just felt, I really enjoy doing this. This is my world, and I'll carry on. And there was talk about other directors coming in and doing Clones and Sith, but that never sort of materialized. I think he just enjoyed being part of our group. He always said that he was an independent filmmaker. Since he left LA and the Directors Guild and went to San Francisco, even though they're big films, he always felt that it was independent filmmaking. He wasn't being told by anybody what to do. And I think that's where the corporate side now, which is nobody's fault, but it's like there are so many interested parties in things that are being made, and that you just get so many opinions. Everything gets watered down. It's like it's not one person's thought process. That's the way of the world. But no, I can't. The more I talk to people like yourself, the more you realize, well, that was a pretty special part of your life that just happened by chance and sliding doors moments. And it doesn't mean I wouldn't have had a really nice, happy life if I hadn't have done it or I'd gone somewhere else. But that was a pretty good run on that.
Pretty good run. I love that's what it's summed up to. A pretty good run on.
The funny thing was, I worked with the 2 films I think I did in between the films was the first XXX film with Vin Diesel, and the second XXX film with Ice Cube. And so I did 5 films in a row with Samuel Jackson. My 5 films, because he was with every one. And then eventually I did Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children with Tim Burton.
Yes.
And Sam Jackson was in that, right? And
oh my gosh, yeah.
The first AD, Kathleen, finally I said to Kathleen, look, I've done it. I still don't think he knows who I am.
Up to 6.
Yeah, so Kathleen did go up to him on set on Miss Peregrine and say, Sam, look, this is Gavin. You've worked with him 6 times before, and he just wants to say hi. He only generally comes in on films for 3 weeks at a time. And then disappears off. It was like, that's funny that I was continually wherever I went, Sam Jackson was sort of part of that sort of world. Maybe he subliminally always knew who I was.
I love that. And actually, is there that's a really fascinating point. Is there any other actors from Star Wars that you worked with later in other films off the top of your head?
No, I mean, the only person that really ran through from Jedi with me was Anthony Daniels, in C-3PO.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. He was sort of, that was really, because I remember when we were showing George the sets on Phantom Menace, we're in Tunisia and we were going out to the homestead, which was basically repeating what John Barry had done and Roger Christian had done on the first films. And I remember Anthony he was actually with us on that scout. There was George, myself, Rick, DP, David Tattersall. But actually George, when we walked out from the car to the homestead, obviously both for Anthony and for George, that was a really odd moment, 15, 20 years. They were coming back and you could see it on their faces. It was like, because we'd rebuilt it. So it wasn't like desolate from what had happened before. We had just reproduced it. So I think, and Anthony, then that made us realize that, wow, it's really only Anthony and George, because, I don't mean we suffered, but we didn't have the luxury of having characters carry on in the sequels or ships or whatever. Everything we did was sort of related apart from the Tunisia stuff, the Naboo craft, they were all new. They weren't, we didn't have the Millennium Falcon. We didn't have the X-Wings. We didn't, so we didn't have that luxury of being able to rely on the audience understanding. And I think that's why we were pleased that it had grabbed hold, because there weren't many characters, apart from like Anakin is really young. There weren't many characters continuing or were in our world that had been in the known world of the first trilogy, and Anthony was one of the only ones. And even stranger than that, and more personal, is we had our two children through IVF, all right, which IVF, and we have it in Australia.
I'm familiar.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the IVF nurse at the London hospital was Anthony Daniels' girlfriend. Yeah.
Wow. Now that's a connection.
Yes.
connection.
So I'll let you digest that. And the kids are fine and healthy and very happy. It's like,
Oh, wow. That's
but Alex,
brilliant.
Alex, our youngest, he's 15. He's seen 10 minutes of a Star Wars film, and that's all. He doesn't like them at all.
You're joking. Wow.
He walked out. So you never know where. I'm hoping, but at least in the future, they'll be able to look back and say, well, Dad did that. That was good.
Yeah.
You can never presume your kids are going to like what you do. I think they're impressed, but they keep it quiet to themselves.
Yeah. They can be the harshest critics at times. Yeah.
The reason I know that is because we were doing a Bryan Singer film, Jack the Giant Slayer, and Brian got a first copy of New Hope, and the Sunday morning he put it on at the hotel he was on in Soho, and invited the crew down to see a first screening on film of the New Hope as it was being reproduced. So Alex was 6 at the time, I think, or 5, and we took him along, and this is the first time he was going to see a Star Wars film. 5 minutes after it started, he was walking out the door.
Couldn't do it. I love that. Well, do I love that? Well, he might come around.
The main thing to say is, however intense the film business is, and like a lot of business, it's not just a film business, it's got to be part of your life as well. I mean, everything around it, your family, everything. It's not just about the film. It's the whole experience of who you meet, where you go, who you work with, different countries. And people have said before, the film business, the group of people on a film ranges from the top executives right down to the guy who sweeps the floor. And you have to, that whole group have to get on with each other and enjoy getting on with each other for 6, 8, 10 months. And that you get great experiences through that, especially on location when you're sort of in a new world. I think we all have, the few of us that went down here from there have huge affection for, the time in Australia, particularly.
This has been such a wonderful conversation and journey and look back through these films. Again, this is, I've been trying not to giggle like a little child this whole conversation, in all honesty, because it's been such a thrill to have you lead us, through this retrospective look into the prequels.
It's funny how you mentioned, obviously, a lot of things are coming up for you don't realize a lot of things you did 20, 30 years ago are suddenly coming up for, anniversaries. It's like, oh yeah, of course, I suppose it is that. Yeah. But no, I'm always happy to talk about them. It seems silly, it's a big part of your life. And we did a lecture last week down at one of the universities here on the silo, just like production design. And it's when you talk, you suddenly realize that there's quite a lot of information that you can impart to people that they just don't understand how it all works. It's not because you're better than them. It's just that you've done it, on that basis.
Yeah.
And they often ask, they're always quite, quite questioning students. And they'll always question you, how did that evolve in that? And often the only answer you have is, well, it seemed a good idea at the time. That's sort of like... You can't always theorize everything you do on a film. As we said earlier, the accidents happen, and that makes the character. So you do all your due diligence, you work hard, but I think we always think we're basically problem solvers. There's always problems to solve, and that's what we're doing all the time. It never runs smoothly. So, and in that you get very creative, trying to solve, not just us, but the whole of production. I remember, when the pod race was all set out in the you might have seen this, was all set out to shoot in the desert in Tunisia, and then the night before we shot, they had the biggest sandstorm.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
photograph is probably in the documentary. It's completely destroyed.
Uh-huh.
But then production, it's very funny. It's a bit like firefighters. Production then spring into action because their problem solved. It's a bit like firemen. You know, they don't do anything until there's a fire. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
it's not that they enjoy the fire, but when the fire happens, they can
They're there.
their skills are there. So suddenly when something like that happens, and I think Rick was wandering around videoing everything for insurance. That was the first thing, just to get everything.
Yeah.
You know, you need to get.
Oh,
But those
my
things
God.
happen, and you know, you see the show, and you don't notice that there was a sandstorm the night before, and everything was sort of, after all the trucking them down from London in a plane. The last place you expect them to get damaged was in a sandstorm that only happens every 50 years.
Yeah, that is. I think that story alone was one of the great tales of just how built together, just work in the moment. The films were, and I mean, you've spoken to that a lot as well. I mean, one question I kind of want to ask and pose is that these films, within their story, the actual story of the movies, but then also the production, real life story of these films being created. What is something that is to be taken away from them, the message of them, that you think that it has imparted with you, but you also think that should be imparted with others?
Well, two things. One is the George Lucas input to work with people who are so passionate about what they do. And it's not about money. I mean, it is, of course, but it's about their thing, what they want to do. And working with people like that is just a pleasure, on that basis. And they're generally nice people. And the other side of it is the fact that it can't, your work just can't be your life. That it has to involve everything, your daily life, your family life, everything you're enjoying, having lunch, whatever. I mean, the first feature film I worked on as a tiny little, it was, wow, this is brilliant. And you sort of expect every film you work on to be brilliantly successful, right? That's sort of your first feeling. But you soon learn after 2 or 3 films that, well, that's not really often just going to be the case.
Yeah.
So the enjoyment has to come from the experience, not just how successful the film is. That's the life, is what is making the film. If they're successful, that's a sort of bonus in a way on top of that. But you've got to enjoy the process. You've got to enjoy the madness and the interaction with people. You've got to enjoy talking to people and collaborating as much as you have your own ideas. It's a huge collaborative business, whether it's like musicians in a band. It's sort of, I think that the two things there, one is to work with people, if you can, who have such a passion and are such a pleasure to work with. And the other side is to make sure for me, it's not just the work, it's everything that surrounds the work, and make sure that is enjoyable and a fun experience. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. What's the point? Yeah.
That's a big question to answer on and finish on. What's the point?
Yeah, what a great climax to the conversation. Yeah. Well, actually, before we go, I would love to show you one of my favorite pieces of merchandise I have. And this is only for special occasions, might I add. I only wear this when I'm going out for perhaps a fancy dinner. It's a Jar Jar Binks watch.
Oh wow! Look at that,
which is lovely.
And is it actually a watch? Or is it just a bracelet?
Yes. He opens up, and the time shows there on a tiny digital screen. But he's one of my favorite pieces. So again, Phantom Menace.
I don't know. There might be something up here. Hold on. Go away. What do I got here? Oh, this. I do have a few odd things that I keep. Here's one of them, which is.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, which way around is it? Oh,
That
I'm
is
across. Oh, there we are. So.
There we go. There it is. Wow. He's stunning.
I tell you one thing is George still, we still get messages and cards at Christmas and holidays from Lucasfilm, and I haven't been there for that long. So that shows you before about, it's not corporate. It is, it's not, we're still Lucasfilm. We're Lucasfilm Star Wars. We're not Disney Star Wars. We're from that period. So you realize there's a nice connection. And it's funny, I had quite a big birthday recently, and my wife, who does video messages, she put a video message together, like everybody wishing you happy birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Which is very nice. And she managed to get George. George was in his Italian villa, and he was there sitting there. Rick was there with him, Rick McCallum. They were obviously in the summer lunch, and sitting next to him was Sam Jackson. So
that is unreal. That's fantastic.
They were all on holiday together. So even then, they were still a group. I still couldn't get away from Sam Jackson, could I?
Yeah, there he is again. He probably still. Did he know? Did he say happy birthday? Did he know?
I don't think he still didn't know who I was. Who were they saying happy birthday to?
He didn't know.
Very funny.
One day, next film, your next Sam Jackson film, maybe that'll be. Well, thank you so much, Gavin, for your time and your wisdom into the Star Wars journey. It is one that is magical and one that has withstood the test of time and will still continue. And you were such a fantastic part of that for those movies. And thank you so much for sharing your journey with me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And I say, talking to people like yourself, you suddenly realize, you get a bit more of a reality check that, people still remember it. It's still quite interesting.
Yeah.
Despite my son not liking them, there's a lot of people out there that do.